At our high school reunion, he raised a glass and laughed. Isabel. Just a housewife. 1 week later, he was on his knees begging the mysterious CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire for a meeting. He didn't know. That CEO was me. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly building something powerful behind closed doors, this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment if you've ever dreamed of turning the tables. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's beautifully calculated. Let's begin. I was invisible in that room. Not because I lacked presence, but because I had been designed to fade. My black dress didn't shimmer. My hair was tied neatly, conservatively. I looked like someone's supportive wife, the kind who makes casseroles and smiles through other people's stories. But that was exactly the illusion I had planned. Because tonight, at the reunion, I was going to study the man who once dismissed me, before tearing down everything he'd ever built. The ballroom at the Waldorf sparkled under chandeliers, dressed in nostalgia. Class of 2013 was written across a golden banner. People laughed at memories that hadn't aged well. There were old flames pretending they weren't disappointed. There were men in tailored suits still trying to impress. And then there was Derek Vaughan. Loud. Arrogant. Crowned in confidence. The kind of man who knew everyone was watching, and enjoyed it. He stood at the bar, surrounded by admirers and sycophants. A silver tie hung carelessly over a custom Italian shirt. His voice carried too far for the size of his group, like he was speaking to an audience. "Oh, Isabel." I heard him say, his voice cutting through the music like a scalpel. "She's just a housewife now, isn't she?" 6 words. Just a housewife now, isn't she? That was the spark. My smile didn't falter. I was 2 feet away, pouring myself a soda. No one noticed. No one ever did. And I liked it that way. They didn't know I just signed an acquisition deal for $180 million 2 hours earlier. They didn't know that I had full controlling stake in a tech infrastructure firm that powered most of the logistics backbone for 2 Fortune 500 retailers. They didn't know that I just paid cash for a lakeside property in Switzerland where my AI team was building something that could make or break the entire e-commerce industry. I looked like a housewife because that's what they needed me to be. But behind the facade was the founder and CEO of Quantum Halcyon, a ghost company with no public-facing leadership, anonymous in its filings, operating through shell firms and encrypted portfolios. And I had built it while making lunchboxes and attending PDA meetings. Derek hadn't changed. His laugh was still a weapon, his smirk a signature. He'd built a reputation in finance, Robel Capital, a firm known for aggressive mergers and media-hungry deals. He bullied smaller companies into acquisition, gutted leadership, flipped profits, and moved on. And now, he had no idea he was about to become prey. "Isabel Granger," he said later, finally noticing me. "Wow. You look, well, still at home then." He meant it as a compliment, but it carried the same undertone. Soft. Passive. Unimportant. I met his gaze and gave a smile I had rehearsed for years. "Always busy," I said lightly. "You know how it is." He chuckled. "Ah, yes, the eternal laundry pile." I watched his hand swirl his whiskey. My fingers itched to pull up the files we had on Robel Capital. I already knew the firm was bleeding on its Southeast Asia ventures. I knew they were seeking a tech partnership to stabilize their digital infrastructure before a leveraged buyout. I also knew their board had been trying for 6 months to land a meeting with a ghost CEO, me. He didn't know he was drinking with the very person who'd been rejecting every one of his board's proposals in silence. I stepped away before my eyes gave too much away. This wasn't the time. The plan had stages. Tonight was simply about remembering who he was, so I could deconstruct him without emotion. I didn't want rage. I wanted precision. At home, my kids were asleep. The lights in my command center, what most would mistake for a home office, glowed like a cockpit. My team was on standby across 5 time zones. I poured a glass of wine, opened the encrypted dashboard, and watched the simulation spin. It was time to begin. Because that night, in front of a room of former classmates who still thought charisma equaled power, I realized something very simple. He hadn't evolved. But I had. And tomorrow, his board would receive a revised merger proposal, one crafted to expose every weakness in his firm's structure. It would come from the same anonymous CEO he'd been chasing. He wouldn't see me coming. But when I arrived, I'd bring the storm. The woman he called a housewife. She was about to become his corporate executioner. The merger proposal was sent at precisely 9:03 a.m. 3 minutes after Derek's assistant opened her inbox, the encrypted document auto-downloaded into their secure file-sharing platform. It had no logo, no letterhead, no signature. Just one line of text above the offer. What you've been chasing now holds your fate. It was the kind of line our psychological analysts said would split an ego in half, enough intrigue to feel powerful, enough threat to breed obsession. My team at Quantum Halcyon had written it like a poem. Every number, every projection, every clause designed to whisper, "You're not in control anymore." I sipped my coffee and watched their reaction unfold in real time through data pings and secure back channels. My CTO, Chiara, was monitoring packet traffic from their internal Slack threads. Nothing illegal. We didn't need to breach, we had eyes in plain sight. Initial confusion, Chiara reported over our secure channel. Then curiosity. Vaughan hasn't spoken yet. Of course not. He was stewing. This wasn't just any proposal. It was bait, wrapped in brilliance. Every projected synergy was slightly off, a decimal here, a date there. Just enough to create unease in anyone who looked too closely. We weren't offering partnership. We were initiating psychological warfare. The proposal promised everything Robel Capital thought it needed: AI systems, predictive data architecture, global digital infrastructure, and nothing they actually had the capacity to absorb. My plan wasn't to destroy the firm overnight. That would be too easy. I wanted Derek to drown in his own desire. The AI models Chiara and I had trained over 4 years were running continuous simulations, mapping out responses, timelines, possible board reactions. Each route had its own contingency. We didn't move like a tech firm. We moved like an insurgency. That afternoon, a shadow meeting was scheduled at Robel. Not the official boardroom, the off-the-record kind that happens behind glass walls, where reputations are negotiated in hushed tones. I already knew who would speak up first: Trina Felds, their CFO. She was on edge from the market's recent whispers about Robel's declining liquidity. Derek would dismiss her. He always dismissed women who didn't flirt. Their CTO, Isaac Lin, would raise technical concerns about compatibility. Derek would silence him with a joke. Maybe something about plug and play. Exactly what we needed. Their cracks were cultural. And we had pressure points. Chiara pinged me again. They're trying to trace the sender. Security team looped in. Let them, I typed. The trail leads to the Caymans, then to Dubai, then to a black hole. We'd spent years building this identity, an entity without a face, with a web of offshore holding firms so dense that even regulators couldn't agree which continent we were headquartered in. We weren't ghosts because we hid. We were ghosts because we were built that way. The world still expected CEOs to be loud. To be male. To shake hands and make speeches. I'd learned early that real power didn't live on stages, it lived in silence. At dinner that night, my daughter asked if she could skip soccer practice to work on her new algorithm. What kind of algorithm? I asked. One that can predict what teacher someone's going to get based on the past 5 years of scheduling, she said. I nearly dropped my fork. You're your mother's daughter, I whispered. She grinned. She knew. By midnight, Robel's team had sent a request for a virtual meeting. Encrypted, anonymous. They wanted to talk to the phantom CEO. The one who'd sent the proposal that made their stomachs churn. I smiled. Hook, line, and tremble. The next morning, I activated a protocol we'd built 2 years prior, black chamber ***. A synthetic voice, layered and modulated to remove gender, would handle the call. The background. An AI-generated office overlooking a city that didn't exist. My camera would remain off. My presence. Ambiguous. When the call began, I didn't speak for the first 20 seconds. Derek broke first. Your offer is unconventional. His voice was tight, clipped. Unconventional times, I replied, the voice smooth, synthetic, emotionless. Require unorthodox partnerships. We don't even know who you are, his COO interjected. That's the point. A beat of silence. I could practically hear his mind spinning. Derek leaned into the power he thought he had. If this is some kind of stunt. It's a test, I interrupted. Of how quickly your firm can adapt to reality. The rest of the call unfolded like a chess match where only one player knew the board was rigged. We offered breadcrumbs, strategic integrations, AI-driven logistics, future earnings potential, but never enough to create certainty. Uncertainty, I'd learned, is more addictive than truth. After the call, Chiara laughed. He's spiraling. I want him desperate, I replied. Not defeated. Not yet. That night, I logged into our QuantNet simulation. Robel's projected stock volatility had already increased by 12%. Institutional investors were spooked. But they hadn't left yet. That was the next phase. A whisper campaign. Anonymous white papers would begin to circulate, critiques of Robel's infrastructure, questions about its long-term viability. Subtle. Academic in tone. Just enough to make analysts ask, is the firm outdated? Chiara sent the draft to me at 3 a.m. It read. In an era of machine learning, companies that rely on brute force acquisitions are fossils with logos. Perfect. By the end of the week, Robel would begin to bleed, slowly, invisibly. Not a collapse. An erosion. Just enough for Derek to feel control slipping through his fingers. He wouldn't know what hit him. Not yet. The housewife he mocked. She had become the phantom in his boardroom. And ghosts never miss. The first crack was barely audible. Robel's internal systems flagged an unusual sell-off, minor, seemingly random. A hedge fund in Singapore. A small investment firm in Toronto. An independent board member reducing exposure just slightly. But it wasn't random. It was me. We had seeded concern across 3 continents in under 72 hours. And Derek Vaughan. He was still chasing shadows. I watched from my home office as Robel's back-end dashboards lit up in our surveillance net. No breaches, just behavioral echoes, searches for our shell firms, confusion about our offshore structuring, internal debate about whether to go public or keep playing the game. Their CIO, Isaac, had even submitted a formal report to the board. Either this partner is the future, or our reckoning. A poetic way of saying, we're out of our league. Chiara and I were already 6 moves ahead. We had deployed Phase 2, destabilization through silence. No replies. No follow-up. Just a vacuum where reassurance should have lived. Derek's team scheduled an emergency strategy session. One of our embedded intel sources, a former Halcyon analyst now working as a vendor to Robel, sent me notes within the hour. Derek keeps repeating the same question, who the hell are they? Good. Let him obsess. Let him spiral. The world had taught him that power was visible. That it lived in boardrooms and LinkedIn titles. But I had learned the opposite. True power was unsearchable. It didn't beg to be understood. It let others fill in the blanks, and choke on their own speculation. Meanwhile, I planted the next seed, Dominic Barcy, an influential investment analyst with a flair for theatrics. We sent him an untraceable tip sheet and a simulated leak from our AI's future project roadmaps. He'd smell blood and do what he always did, make noise. Sure enough, 2 days later, his podcast dropped. There's a new player in town. Quantum Halcyon. Shadow firm. No CEO. No public footprint. But word on the street. They're rewriting how markets think about predictive architecture. And if they're looking at Robel, it's not a merger. It's a takeover. Derek heard it within the hour. Chiara sent me a video snippet, Derek watching the screen in his corner office, jaw clenched, arms folded. He didn't blink once during the 32-second segment. Then, he slammed his laptop shut. We were getting to him. But this wasn't about humiliation. Not yet. It was about friction, making him question his foundation. The moment Derek started doubting his allies, his tech team, his own instincts, that was when the real collapse would begin. So I turned to our next operative, Noelle, our behavioral specialist. Noelle was the quietest person in any room, and the most dangerous. She had profiled over 140 executives in her time at Halcyon. Her talent. Finding the one fracture line that would make even the most seasoned leader crumble. She read Derek's profile for 20 minutes in silence before speaking. Ego inflation. Gender entitlement. Public reputation addiction. He doesn't fear loss. He fears irrelevance. I blinked. So we don't attack his money. We attack his image, she said, tapping her tablet. Make him feel forgotten. We updated our campaign overnight. The next day, 3 prominent fintech publications ran feature stories on emerging CEOs in stealth mode tech. Not one mentioned Derek. But each hinted at an anonymous player reshaping the investment landscape. A ghost leader. Gender-neutral language. Subtle nods. Readers speculated wildly. The Reddit threads blew up. Who is the Halcyon CEO? Rumor, female founder who beat out 4 major VCs in 2021. Is it her? The one from the old blockchain consortium? I let it ride. Let them guess. Because in Derek's world, if you weren't named, you didn't matter. He tried to insert himself into the conversation, leaked a company statement claiming forward-thinking partnerships in development. No one cared. The internet had moved on. That night, my ex-husband called. I saw the podcast. I heard the speculation. Are you? I'm building something, I said. Not destroying someone. But deep down, I knew I was doing both. He paused. Does he know it's you? Not yet. My ex let out a low whistle. Damn. He always knew I was strategic. He just never expected me to be surgical. The next morning, Robel's stock ticked down again. Only 1.4%. But for Derek, that was blood in the water. He called an all-hands meeting. Yelled at Isaac. Berated Trina. Accused junior staff of leaking intel. All while we remained silent. Chiara sent me a message. He's cracking. And that's when we moved in for the real cut. We deployed Protocol Foxglove, a simulation tool that would craft a shadow counterproposal, leaked not to Rob L., but to one of its rival firms. A company Derek had poached talent from years ago. They'd been dying for revenge. We gave them the means to accelerate it. Within 48 hours, the rival firm filed for exploratory negotiations with Halcyon. Publicly. On record. And suddenly, Derek wasn't being courted. He was being left behind. Robel's board panicked. Whispers of instability turned into murmurs of betrayal. Analysts speculated that Quantum Halcyon had never been interested in Robel, that it was all bait to weaken them for another deal. And that's when Derek finally called me. Private line. No assistant. No filters. Isabel, he said, breath shallow. Is this you? I didn't respond. Not yet. Let the silence answer. Because in that moment, for the first time in his life, Derek Vaughan understood. This wasn't about a merger. This wasn't about business. This was about the cost of arrogance. And the woman he called just a housewife. She had just made his empire flinch. The first time Derek didn't show up for a board meeting, it was excused as travel. The second time, as illness. But by the third, even his inner circle knew, something was breaking. And it wasn't just in his calendar, it was in his head. That's when I knew Phase 3 could begin. We called it the isolation protocol. Its aim wasn't to destroy Robel's valuation. Not yet. The goal was subtler, quieter, to separate Derek from the very network he'd used as his shield. His board. His advisors. His sense of invincibility. Power in business doesn't crumble when money dries, it implodes when people stop believing in the man holding the pen. To start, we released nothing. Just more silence. But within that silence, we planted stories, just out of reach, just ambiguous enough to bloom into paranoia. Our network of industry contacts posted curated, anonymous, insider quotes on forums and trade Slack channels. He's not responding to investors anymore. Robel's CTO hasn't logged into the dev portal for days. The Halcyon deal. I heard they passed on Robel entirely. None of it confirmed. But confirmation wasn't the point. Perception was. Soon after, we created a fictitious industry analyst named Mira Song, complete with LinkedIn, archived conference presentations, and years of fabricated comments on tech articles. Mira leaked a polished analysis that Robel's internal culture had become too top-down, rigid, and male-dominated for modern partnerships. It went viral. Women in tech forums reposted it. Commentators debated whether Vaughan culture had outlived its relevance. No direct accusations, just a gentle suggestion that perhaps the future didn't look like Derek Vaughan anymore. His silence spoke louder than any statement. Meanwhile, I began preparing the endgame. I visited the Halcyon Geneva lab, a place even most of my board hadn't seen. Hidden beneath a clean energy institute, our predictive AI was doing more than market modeling. It was studying decision fatigue. Psychological decay. How powerful people unravel under sustained ambiguity. One screen pulsed in front of me. A name, Derek Vaughan. Chiara joined me beside the display. His decision maps are shortening, she said. Translation, Derek's impulse control was deteriorating. He was reacting more. Planning less. And I was about to hit the final nerve. The following week, we released the Horizon Index, a new economic model designed to project long-term viability of mergers based on internal cultural adaptability. On the surface, it was academic. Beneath it, a trap. We embedded real Robel data into the case study, masked in anonymized variables. But to anyone in the know, it was obvious. and brutal. Derek's entire business model was framed as a cautionary tale. On the day the index dropped, four venture capital partners distanced themselves from Rob L. Two resigned from their advisory boards. One issued a vague statement about reevaluating future exposure to outdated corporate frameworks. He tried to fight back. Issued a public letter through Forbes. Claimed Rob L. was in discussions with multiple revolutionary partners, including Halcyon. That was his mistake. He named us. We didn't respond. But others did. Industry journalists noted that Halcyon had never publicly confirmed any interest. Fintech forums joked that Derek had ghosted himself. The nickname stuck. Ghosted Vaughn. A meme was born, his smirking reunion photo, captioned asterisk, just a housewife, huh? Asterisk. Even his allies stopped laughing. Inside Rob L., Isaac Lynn resigned. Trina took medical leave. Derek tried to fire junior analysts who disagreed with him, but it was too late. The culture he built on dominance had turned into quicksand. We watched him pace in real time. A security contractor in Robel's building, another quiet ally, uploaded muted security footage to our channel. Derek alone in the conference room, shuffling printouts, yanking cables from a projector, talking to no one. He was unraveling. Publicly. Still, I wasn't done. Noel, our behavioral analyst, prepared the final trigger, an interview request. Anonymous, via encrypted email. Just a single sentence. Would you like to share your side of the Halcyon rejection? No logo. No signature. Just the kind of bait his ego couldn't resist. Derek responded in 6 minutes. He demanded to know who was behind the leak. Threatened legal action. Asked if the CEO was a man, a woman, or even real. Called it a hoax. No reply. His follow-up email was longer. Rambling. Confessional. Then desperate. I read it once. Then deleted it. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the world that let him win for so long, and what it felt like when someone finally said, no more. Derek Vaughn hadn't been taken down by scandal. Or lawsuits. Or hackers. He'd been dismantled by shadows. By intelligence. By strategy. And most of all, by the woman he thought had disappeared into domesticity. The next time his board met, Derek wasn't invited. And I was already preparing for the stage. Because ghosts can haunt. But I was about to appear in full light. And show the world exactly who'd been pulling the strings. It was time to step out of the shadows. Not with a press release. Not with a LinkedIn post. But with an event so precise, so undeniable, that no whisper campaign could contain it. We chose the Future Tech Global Summit, an exclusive industry gathering held once a year in Amsterdam. The most powerful minds in tech, finance, and policy flew in for it. And this year, for the first time, Halcyon would be listed as a keynote sponsor. But no one knew who would take the stage. That was the plan. I arrived 2 days early. Not to rehearse, but to observe. The chatter had already begun in the corridors and lounges. Halcyon's anonymity had become an obsession. Who was behind the company rewriting industry models? Why hadn't they ever shown their face? Was it a collective? A ghost team? No one guessed it was me. Because I was there. Sitting in plain sight. Simple black blazer. No entourage. No security detail. Just a tablet in my lap, taking notes. And across the hall. Derek Vaughn. Still here. Still trying. He had clawed his way onto a panel about ethical growth in volatile markets. A last-ditch effort to stay relevant. He didn't know I was just across the aisle. Or maybe he did. We locked eyes, once. Brief. Measured. His eyes flickered, not in recognition, but in fear. That primal kind. Like when you feel the cold breath of something you tried to bury. The following evening, as the sun set behind the glass spires of Amsterdam's skyline, the final stage was set. Chiara and Noel reviewed the live feeds. Over 2,000 attendees. 83 high-level press agents. 23 potential venture backers. Every single one about to witness a revelation. Backstage, I stood alone. My daughter texted. "You ready, Mom?" I stared at the words. My hand trembled. Not from nerves. From history. From years of folding laundry with lectures in my ears. From nights rewriting code between homework and dinner. From the weight of what I had built, brick by unseen brick. "Always," I replied. At exactly 7 p.m., the lights dimmed. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. And now, the long-awaited keynote by Halcyon's founder and CEO. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Phones rose. Journalists readied live streams. I walked out. Silence. Then a few gasps. Then, recognition. Not because they knew me. But because one man did. Derek Vaughan rose halfway from his chair. He didn't move. He just stared. And I smiled. "Good evening," I said, calm and steady. "My name is Isabel Granger. And for the past 7 years, you've been hearing my company's name, without ever seeing the woman behind it." The auditorium froze. This was intentional. Because I wanted to build a system that didn't rely on image or assumption. That wasn't built to be worshipped, but watched. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with Halcyon's impact metrics, supply chain innovations, AI predictions, disaster mitigation algorithms. Real numbers. Real reach. But today, I step forward not because I need to be seen, but because it's time we change the narrative of who gets to lead. I turned to the crowd, scanning the rows. My voice dropped lower, intimate. I was told I was just a housewife. That raising children and writing code couldn't live in the same breath. That motherhood was a pause, not a pivot. The murmurs were gone. Now there was only breathless quiet. Let me be clear, my children didn't distract me from greatness. They gave it focus. I turned toward Derek. He said I was just a housewife. 1 week later, he was chasing a merger proposal. From me. Cameras flashed. Mouths opened. Some gasped. Others smirked, slowly catching up. I paused. This isn't a revenge speech. This is a correction. A recalibration of the narrative we've been fed. And a warning to every system that still pretends vision comes in one form. The applause came slowly. Then louder. Then roaring. Derek sat down. He didn't look angry. He looked empty. He finally knew. He hadn't just lost a deal. He'd become a footnote in someone else's story. When I left the stage, Noelle was waiting. "He'll never recover," she said. "Good," I whispered. Because this wasn't for him. Chiara joined us. "You just started something bigger." She was right. Because in the hours that followed, my inbox exploded. Not with venture offers. But with messages from women. From mothers. From coders and cleaners and creators. "Thank you." I cried. "You made us visible." The world had witnessed my emergence. But I hadn't just revealed my identity. I had rewritten the rules. The housewife they dismissed. She was now the name in every boardroom whisper. And this was only the beginning. The morning after the summit, the world was no longer the same. At 6:17 a.m., my daughter woke me with a whisper. "Mom, you're on every screen." Indeed, I was. My inbox had crossed 12,000 messages. A hashtag with my name had trended globally overnight. Not from scandal. Not from drama. But from precision, clarity, and truth. The kind that doesn't roar, but reshapes the room when spoken aloud. I didn't smile. Not yet. There was still one more ripple to track. Derek Vaughan. The man who'd been the storm in every room for a decade had gone silent. No public statement. No denial. No deflection. And that silence was louder than any interview he could have given. Chiara pulled up the market dashboards. Robel Capital stock had dropped 8.3% in 14 hours. "We didn't even say their name," she said. I sipped my tea. We didn't need to. The industry had done the math. They knew the ghost CEO Robel had chased for 8 months, the one who'd rejected their merger with an exquisitely written "no" was me. They also knew Derek had spent a decade mocking the very kind of intelligence that had now publicly outmaneuvered him. Meanwhile, Quantum Halcyon's private valuation soared. Our predictive systems began onboarding interest from global disaster relief groups, health data foundations, and green energy platforms. Not just investors, mission partners. And in my inbox, the real gold had arrived. A message from the Chancellor of Leiden University. An offer to co-author a research paper on invisible leadership frameworks. Followed by a note from the World Bank. Then the African Union Digital Resilience Task Force. And finally, a quiet, humble message from a 17-year-old girl in Manila. "I want to be like you. My dad says I should learn typing. I started Python last night instead." That was the moment I finally allowed myself to cry. Not from triumph. From release. Years of silence. Of pretending not to know more than the men who interrupted me. Of smiling through assumptions. Of being kind while I dismantled empires in the dark. Now, I could lead out loud. Elena, my longtime strategic advisor and closest confidant, arrived that afternoon. She stood at the doorway of my office, arms folded, smirking. "So, should we finally tell the world what Halcyon really has been building?" I turned to her slowly. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because the next layer," I said, "won't be about them." She nodded, already understanding. "It's about us." We sat down and activated Phase 4, Outreach Integration. Our plan was simple. Use Halcyon's predictive models not just to guide markets, but to guide potential. Map underserved schools. Flag hidden prodigies in poor communities. Match them with microfellowships. Fund them anonymously. Watch them rise. Because my daughter didn't need to be the exception. She needed to be part of a generation that never had to ask for permission to matter. Meanwhile, Derek finally surfaced. A short interview. Grainy lighting. The kind of video a publicist begs their client not to upload. He looked exhausted. He admitted the truth without saying my name. We underestimated where leadership is heading. And I made assumptions that were inappropriate. There it was. A half-confession. A reluctant obituary for an old way of thinking. The media went gentle. Some blamed his fall on tech disruption. Others speculated burnout. No one dared connect the dots too precisely. But the women did. In forums. In group chats. In quiet little corners of the internet, they celebrated. Not because a man fell, but because a woman stood. And then, a week later, something unexpected happened. An invitation arrived from the United Nations Digital Sovereignty Council. They wanted Halcyon's input on the future of governance AI. Specifically, from me. I didn't say yes. Not yet. First, I went home. To the kitchen where it all began. I poured tea. I looked out the window. My daughter sat at the counter, building a model for her school robotics project. She looked up. You gonna do it? I don't know. She shrugged. You don't have to prove anything. I sat beside her, brushing her hair gently back behind her ear. I'm not trying to prove anything, honey. I'm trying to build something. She smiled. Like I'm trying to build this arm. I laughed. Exactly. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. Derek's downfall was never the real story. The real story was that when a woman builds in silence, she's not hiding. She's preparing. And when she finally speaks, she changes the future. The aftershock wasn't Derek's silence. It was the sound of millions of women exhaling at once. Realizing they were never just anything. They were always everything. The collapse of Derek Vaughan wasn't the final move. It was the opening bell. With Robel Capital's reputation crumbling and Derek stepping down under the guise of a wellness leave, a strange quiet fell across the tech finance world. Not relief. Not applause. But recalibration. They just witnessed something no press conference could explain. A silent correction of power. And now everyone was looking around the room, wondering. Who's next? Meanwhile, we were already 5 steps ahead. Elena and I activated what we had codenamed Project Helix. It was time to re-engineer the ladder itself. While the world debated if Halcyon's rise was a fluke or a case study, we were building something deeper, a distributed incubator system for marginalized thinkers, hidden innovators working at the edges of recognition. Rural scientists. Teenage coders. Moms building prototype sensors between diaper changes. We used our AI to identify patterns. Not just in performance. In potential. Unrefined, quiet brilliance that never showed up on polished resumes. And we paired them with what we had: capital, infrastructure, invisible mentorship. Halcyon's next evolution wouldn't be a product. It would be a platform for rising ghosts. Those who, like me, had been overlooked because they didn't walk loud enough or look corporate enough. Meanwhile, I received dozens of media offers every day. Talk shows. Feature profiles. TED invitations. I said no to all of them. Not because I didn't want to speak. But because I wanted the story to become bigger than me. The revenge arc was juicy, but incomplete. If I left it there, just the housewife who outplayed the banker, then I'd become the exception. And women don't need exceptions. They need blueprints. So I asked Elena to reach out to 6 women whose names had popped up in our earliest analytics: single mothers, community teachers, displaced engineers. Each of them running quietly extraordinary side projects with zero support. We flew them in under anonymity. No press. No labels. Just a safe room, a whiteboard, and trust. They came in nervous. They left as co-founders of Helix One, the first Halcyon-backed public tech lab run entirely by women who had never been invited to a boardroom before. When the news quietly leaked, forums lit up again. Not with gossip. With blueprints. They just launched a 12-year-old's quantum simulation model. A former janitor invented a soil sensor that cuts waste by 70%. She coded it from a public library laptop. My favorite comment. They said she was just a housewife. She said, cool. Watch me build a civilization. That's when I knew the arc had shifted. From revenge to reclamation. Still, there were shadows to clean up. One of Robel's former board members emailed me directly, an apology wrapped in curiosity. "I'll admit," he wrote, "I was part of the system that let him speak over women like you. I'm trying to understand what I missed." I stared at that email for a long time. Then, I responded. "You didn't miss anything. You just never looked beneath the surface. Start there." A week later, he announced a full divestment from Robel and joined the Halcyon Ethics Advisory team. Some called it redemption. I called it overdue course correction. Around this time, Derek Vaughan resurfaced again. A blog post. No fanfare. Just him, alone, writing about failure. He didn't name me. He didn't apologize. But in one paragraph, he said, "I once defined power by who stood at the front of the room. Then someone I mocked quietly rearranged the room, and never had to raise her voice." That was the closest he could get. And it was enough. I forwarded the post to Elena and Chiara. Chiara replied with a single emoji, a chess queen. Meanwhile, Halcyon's data lab produced a new internal report. The Isabel effect. A term coined not by us, but by a behavioral economist tracking the shift in female founder applications across 5 continents. After the summit, the rate had surged by 31%. That wasn't a statistic. That was proof. Proof that what we had done didn't end with humiliation. It began with validation. And now, the world had questions. What would we build next? Would Halcyon go public? Would we franchise the Helix model? My answer, when asked at a private investor dinner, was simple. We're not scaling for profit. We're scaling for access. They didn't clap. They nodded. Real power doesn't perform. It reorients. And then, one morning, my daughter walked into my office, holding a tablet. "Mom," she said, wide-eyed. "Can I show you something?" It was her latest AI model. She trained it to detect emotional burnout in student writing by analyzing their journal entries in class. Early warnings for schools. Built for nothing but care. "This could change education," I whispered. She shrugged. "I just didn't want anyone to feel like they're invisible." That's when I broke. I hugged her tighter than I ever had. Not because I saw myself in her, but because she saw everyone else. I turned to Elena that night. "You know what we've really done?" She raised an eyebrow. "We've built a world where people don't have to fight to be seen first, before they're finally allowed to matter." She smiled. "And we did it," she said, "because one man called you a housewife." I smiled back. "No," I whispered. "We did it because I never believed he was right." And now, the blueprint was out. And the next generation. They weren't just following it. They were improving it. By the time the fiscal year closed, Halcyon had surpassed every metric our original models projected. Not in raw valuation, that wasn't our aim, but in disruption of expectation. 87 former investors from male-led tech firms had approached us for advisory roles. 6 Fortune 100 companies had adopted fragments of our Helix framework. And one Ivy League business school had quietly rewritten an entire ethics module around what they called the Halcyon maneuver. I read their case study. They had everything: timelines, simulations, media impact, predictive culture shifts. Everything but the real truth. They still thought the key moment was the summit speech. They were wrong. The real beginning had been a casual insult at a table full of men. An insult that was never meant to sting, only to categorize. And that's why it worked. Because systemic underestimation doesn't arrive with malice. It arrives with a smile and a compliment that diminishes. And if you're not ready, it becomes a cage you start believing belongs to you. But I had prepared. Quietly. Consistently. For 10 years, I turned that cage into a command center. Now, the system was trying to understand me. I received an invitation from the Global Economic Gender Council, asking if I would speak at the upcoming summit on Invisible Capital. I said yes. But only on one condition. They couldn't introduce me as a CEO. They had to introduce me the way Derek once did. This next speaker, I wrote for the MC, was once called just a housewife. She accepted the compliment, and then rewrote the meaning. It landed exactly as I intended. When I walked on stage, the room didn't erupt. It stood still. Not in awe. In correction. A collective exhale from a room that realized they'd been walking in the wrong direction, and someone had turned on a light behind them. The speech wasn't emotional. It was surgical. I told them the truth. That economic systems reward noise, not value. That the loudest voices often own the least original ideas. That every system built without diverse input becomes brittle. And that women like me, we weren't here to be added as tokens. We were here to reroute the flow of decision-making entirely. Afterwards, 3 world leaders approached me privately. Each asked a version of the same question. How did you stay patient so long? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked them something back. Have you ever had to finish building the ship before announcing you're at sea? They didn't reply. But one nodded. Slowly. Because he finally understood. I didn't wait to be accepted. I waited until my silence couldn't be ignored. A few weeks later, something odd happened. I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Derek. Not an apology. Not really. Just a page of reflection. Sent, I suspect, because he knew anything online would be public record. It read. I didn't know how to respect what I couldn't define. And I only defined success by my own reflection. You didn't beat me, Isabel. You freed me from the delusion that I ever understood power at all. I sat with the letter for a long time. Then I folded it, tucked it inside my journal, and moved on. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Correction was. And now, the real work had begun. Halcyon launched Helix 2, a mobile, adaptive tech lab that traveled between refugee camps, rural villages, and underserved schools. No Wi-Fi. We built it. No electricity. We stored solar. No institutional trust. We brought women from the community to lead the curriculum. In one village, a 13-year-old girl named Amina built a pressure sensor from tin foil and a cracked calculator. She's better than I was, I told Chiara, watching her from the control van. She's better because of you, Chiara said. No, I corrected. She's better because of who she already was. We just stopped getting in her way. At the end of that year, I gave one final interview. A private stream. Closed questions. No broadcast. The last question was simple. What do you say now to the women still being called just a housewife? I looked straight into the lens. Nothing, I said. Because they already know. They know that every time someone dismisses them, they're gaining another secret. Another strength. Another reason to keep building. They know the world will see them last. And that's why their moves will hit first. They don't need me to tell them what's possible. They just need space. And silence. And strategy. I leaned back. And I've made sure the world can't take those things from them anymore. That was the last line. I stood up, removed the mic, and stepped into the dusk-lit hallway where my daughter waited. She held a folder under her arm, her prototype project for Helix Jr. "Ready?" she asked. I looked at her. At the future I had spent years carving in the dark. "Always," I said. And together, we walked into the next unknown. Not as a woman and her daughter, but as two builders. Of systems. Of stories. Of what comes next. The final lesson didn't come in a boardroom. It came in a school gymnasium with peeling paint, broken fans, and a crowd of children sitting cross-legged on a concrete floor. We had launched Helix Jr. 6 months prior, a pilot program to bring ethical coding, environmental science, and design thinking into underfunded public schools. We didn't teach them to succeed. We taught them to see, to notice systems, to question assumptions, to trust their observations over someone else's labels. That day, I was invited to watch a demo by the program's youngest cohort, ages 9 to 11. One group had built a small AI bot that could detect when students were anxious during group projects and offer emotional support phrases. Another used recycled components to build a temperature-sensitive hand sanitizer dispenser. But it was the last group that stopped me in my tracks. 3 girls, no older than 10, had drawn a flowchart on a poster board titled, "What to do when they say you're not enough." Box 1, smile, so they don't know. Box 2, work quietly while they sleep. Box 3, build something so loud it whispers. Box 4, let the world guess. Box 5, show up when they've forgotten you. Box 6, never explain. Just build ****. My chest tightened. They didn't know my story. But somehow, they did. The final lesson was this. I didn't just change a man's mind. Or an industry's metric. Or a boardroom's decorum. I had shifted the silent rules that girls inherit by watching the world treat their mothers like background noise. And now, they were writing their own playbooks. Back at headquarters, Elena had begun organizing a new task force. She called it Structure Zero, an initiative aimed at dismantling obsolete leadership archetypes in legacy corporations. It wasn't about replacing men. It was about redesigning the definition of command, influence, and direction. Chiara mapped it all out. She showed me a model that made me pause. A wheel. No center. No pinnacle. No founder at the top. Just nodes. Connected. Responsive. Interchangeable. That's the future, she said. That's what you made possible. I didn't say anything for a long time. Because part of me hadn't realized I was still holding on to the past. Even after the speech. Even after Derek's letter. Even after Helix 1 and 2 and now Junior. There was a small corner of my mind still stuck in that reunion ballroom, standing at the refreshment table, pretending not to hear him say, "She's just a housewife." And now, looking at this wheel, this new way of imagining leadership, I finally understood. It was never about disproving him. It was about making sure that his sentence never got to define someone else again. So I took a step back. I told Elena I wanted to retire from the public-facing role of halcyon by year's end. Let others speak. Let the wheel turn without me at the center. She didn't argue. She smiled. You've already said everything without saying it. In my final week, I gave one last internal address. No cameras. Just the team. I told them this. We were taught to aim for the top. But the top is a narrow place, easy to fall from and hard to breathe in. What we've built is wider. Deeper. And it carries more than just one name. We didn't create an empire. We created a pattern, one that anyone can follow. So when someone tells you to wait your turn, remind them the table has no head anymore. They stood in silence. And then, soft, slow, powerful, applause broke. Not celebration, but acknowledgement. And I knew. It was time. I handed over my badge, my title, and my access codes. Kept only one thing. A single photo. Me in that reunion hall. Standing near the snack table. Expression unreadable. Still invisible. I wrote a caption in the corner with a silver pen. Phase 1, let them underestimate you. Then I slipped it into my daughter's notebook. She'd find it one day. Maybe after she finished her second patent. Maybe after her first keynote. Or maybe after someone looked her in the eyes and said she wasn't ready. And she'd remember. That silence can be a scalpel. And soft hands can hold systems. And sometimes, the housewife isn't a chapter. She's the author. And we're all living in the book she decided to write. 5 years later, I returned to the place where it all began. The reunion hall. Class of 2023's 20-year celebration. Same chandeliers. Same small talk. Same overpriced cocktails in cheap glasses. But the air had shifted. The room didn't carry the weight of expectation anymore, it carried awareness. This time, I didn't sneak in as the silent wife with a ponytail and careful nods. I arrived as a woman no longer required to perform invisibility. Still, I wore black. Not as camouflage, but as tribute. To the version of me who once believed being unseen was the only way to be safe. To the woman who smiled while being reduced. To the architect who mapped a fortress inside folded laundry and late-night YouTube courses. People greeted me differently now. Not with awe. Not with fear. But with something closer to respect. The kind that comes from watching someone build slowly, steadily, and without explanation. One woman approached, an old acquaintance from gym class. I just wanted to say, thank you, she said. For what? I asked, genuinely curious. She smiled. For not leaving the door closed behind you. Her eyes welled up. I got out of a firm last year. Started my own thing. I used to think I had to wait for someone to notice me. After your summit speech, I realized I just needed to stop asking. That was it. Not fame. Not accolades. That was the prize. A door held open. Quietly. Permanently. As the night went on, I found myself at the same refreshment table from years ago. Same metal punch bowl. Same bad cookies. That's when I heard it. A voice behind me, tentative, unsure. Isabel. I turned. It was Derek. Older. Smaller. Not physically, but spiritually. He looked like a man who had finally stopped pretending the center of the world spun around him. I didn't know if I should come tonight, he said. I nodded. You didn't need permission. He hesitated. Then. You were always building something, weren't you? I was, I said. He stared at the cookies. I didn't even see it. You weren't meant to. He laughed quietly. Fair. Silence stretched between us. Then, he surprised me. Would you mind if I asked you one thing? Go ahead. He looked at me, not with ego. Not with shame. Just curiosity. When did you know you'd won? I didn't answer immediately. Because that was the wrong question. I didn't win, I said finally. I built something you didn't even know existed. Then I lost. No, I said gently. You lived by different rules. You thought power was about being first, loudest, tallest. And you? I made peace with being the last voice in the room. The one people remember when the noise fades. He nodded, slowly. I deserved what happened. No one deserves collapse, I replied. But we all deserve truth. And sometimes the system has to snap for people to see what it was hiding. He stood there for a moment. Then offered his hand. I took it. Not as forgiveness. As closure. Later that night, I stepped outside, away from the music and memories. The street was quiet. The air, sharp with late autumn chill. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. We got funding. Helix Jr. just partnered with UNESCO. Another seed. Another system turned fertile. I looked up at the sky. For years, I had believed silence was the price of transformation. Now I knew better. Silence was the soil. Everything I had grown, every algorithm, every initiative, every girl who stopped apologizing for being brilliant, it had all sprouted from that place where people thought I wasn't doing anything. That space they called small. Insignificant. Domestic. But I hadn't been quiet. I'd been building. And now, the house they tried to bury me in had become the world they were learning to live in. I walked home. Alone. Peaceful. Proud. And somewhere, in 1,000 classrooms, kitchens, and forgotten corners. Another woman. Another daughter. Another housewife. Was picking up her first brick.